Tonight, ahead of the general election, our party leader interviews continue. Good evening, I'm Paul Clark. This is View from Stormont. On tonight's programme, ahead of the general election, you'll hear from the DUP's Gavin Robinson and Sinn Féin's Michelle O'Neill. Analysing what they'll have to say will be Deirdre Heenan, Suzanne Breen and David McCann. As the latest opinion polls point towards a massive win for Labour in Britain, just what are we to make of that? And the return of Nigel Farage to frontline politics as the leader of Reform. I'll be joined by the Mirror's Kevin Maguire and Talk TV's Peter Cardwell. Tonight we're continuing our series of interviews with the party leaders. It's the turn of the DUP and Sinn Féin. In the last Parliament, the DUP returned with 8 seats, the largest of the Northern Ireland parties. I spoke to Gavin Robinson earlier. In this election, why should people vote for the DUP?
Good evening, Paul. I think people are very prepared to vote DUP and have been indicating so on the campaign trail over the last number of weeks because they recognise not only our position, but they know DUP delivery. They want a strong voice for Northern Ireland, a pro-union voice speaking up for them in their national parliament. When they look back over the last Parliament and they can see what we've delivered for Northern Ireland, whether it's with broadband or for starting the conversation about getting finances right for the delivery of public services in Northern Ireland. They recognise the track record of delivery and they are placing their trust in us.
Let's deal then with this election now. Why, on this occasion, should the electorate trust you?
Well, because they recognise that, unlike others in this campaign, we're prepared to go and speak up for them and stand up for Northern Ireland in our national parliament, prepared to make the decisions to ensure Northern Ireland works. That's what people get when they vote DUP. And unlike others who sometimes are prepared to complain about issues but do nothing about them, year after year, Parliament after Parliament, the Democratic Unionist Party will go to Westminster, highlight problems, of course, but work night and day to resolve them, banking the progress as we go along and delivering for the people of Northern Ireland.
You now admit that you oversold the deal to restore power sharing.
Well, no, I said there should be cautious realism at the time, and I can stand over everything I have said from January, February, right through to last week and this week. And it's about this, recognising that Northern Ireland was placed in an invidious position in 2019, a position that we stood against and voted against in Parliament, working night and day to get to a better place and recognising that at the end of our negotiations with government, we had achieved sufficient progress to see the restoration of devolution. Devolution that even in the first 100 days, it is DUP ministers delivering on the commitments that they made to the people of Northern Ireland. But recognising, Paul, that there's still much more work to do, and I was very clear about that.
We were told in January that the Irish sea border was gone. That's what you said. And in June, you're saying something else.
Well, it's not what I said, and you'll not be able to find a quote of me saying that because it was much more nuanced than you.
It's what the then party leader said.
It's not what I said, Paul, and it's much more nuanced than you might like to portray this evening. But you'll remember, I was here in your studio talking about these issues, recognising that when we saw the difficulties affecting Northern Ireland's constitutional position, the difficulties on trade, the difficulties on democracy, there was a significant body of work to be engaged with. We worked at it. We have achieved progress. We said back in January that progress was sufficient to see the restoration of devolution, but not that it's a job over.
But was the whole thing oversold, looking back?
I've said very clearly there should have been more cautious realism. There are things that I know will be delivered that haven't been delivered just yet. I think it was very important that during the course of our negotiations with the government, we just didn't work with the government at the time. We worked with those that we thought may be likely to form the next government and build relationships with the Labour Party. And they will stand over the commitments that have been made. They have indicated that very clearly, both in Parliament, but since then in public. So that is the commitment to the people. Identify the issues, Paul, but work at them night and day.
As the then Deputy Leader of the DUP, you were there during the negotiations, so you cannot really walk away now, can you?
Well, I'm not walking away. I'm saying very clearly that there was positive progress made and delivered for the people of Northern Ireland.
Why did Lord Dodds,
highlighting the problems and working night and day to resolve them? Sufficient progress in January, but still more work, Paul, yet to do. And that's what you get from the Democratic Unionist Party. Not people who complain, not people who walk away, but people who night and day will work to make Northern Ireland work.
And
that's the record of delivery that we have.
Lord Dodds, Lord Morrow and some of the MPs said the deal had been oversold. Why did you not?
I've said very clearly the position that we have. I was very honest in my assessment at the time in January, and I'm very honest today. Significant progress made, progress sufficient to see the restoration of devolution, but night and day we will work at issues to resolve them, Paul. Others in this election will complain and do nothing. There are some in this election who put themselves before the people and have no interest in standing up or speaking out for anybody. They won't take their seats in Westminster. But we recognise the benefits for Northern Ireland through our strong relationship in this United Kingdom. That's what we are doing, standing up for people who are prepared to speak out on the issues that matter to them to make Northern Ireland
Why should unionism trust you this time? Because in the last general election, the DUP got 31%. This time, you're standing at 21%.
Well, I think
and that's in the polls.
You will have seen very clearly the polls rose today, though you haven't presented it in that way.
Since the last general election, you are 10 points down. Since the last general election, you are 10 points down.
You haven't presented it in that way, but people have a choice, Paul. People in this election know very clearly, and I talk to them night and day. If they want a strong voice for Northern Ireland in Westminster, if they want to elect a party that is prepared not only to highlight the problems, but to work to resolve them, to put our best foot forward, not to silence Northern Ireland, but to stand up and speak up for them, they are voting Democratic Unionist Party. And whilst the polls may say that today, let's see on the 4th of July, because the people that I engage with and my colleagues engage with right across Northern Ireland are recognising that the DUP is the party for them. And if they want a pro-unionist voice, we are the only party in 16 out of 18 seats that can provide that effective voice for them.
Are you concerned that voters stay at home or vote for the TUV?
I don't see or hear that sort of disengagement when we are out campaigning. People recognise that this is an election that gives the people of Northern Ireland a choice as to who stands up and speaks up for them. They're not interested in abstentionism. They're interested in recognising the strong history of delivery that my colleagues and I have, the ability to stand up and speak proudly and confidently for Northern Ireland in our national parliament. Very rarely do we hear you ever put questions about the successes and the achievements, but you ask those in rural Northern Ireland who now access broadband as a consequence of the DUP.
Will the TUV not split votes in certain constituencies?
I would like to have seen greater unionist cooperation. I've been very clear about that. I think it would have been a recognition of what people on the doors are asking for us. But the truth is, the choice doesn't rest with any party. The strength of any individual elector's vote is the same as mine. And I can tell you, Paul, not at my request, but they are indicating to us, ordinary people who recognise the benefits of Northern Ireland and its place within the United Kingdom are voting for us because they recognise in my constituency and right across Northern Ireland that if they want a pro-union voice, it's a DUP MP they'll get.
And they will have their say on the 4th of July. But you have been saying constantly that you want unionist unity. Now, for all the talk, the reality is it is a fairy tale.
No, and I don't recall...
Well, then there are too many unionist parties standing against you in that case. Is that what you're saying?
So the people in Northern Ireland that believe in the Union, that want to see Northern Ireland flourish within the United Kingdom, would like to see greater cooperation between parties, and I agree with them. And I tried to get agreement with other unionist leaders, and the people know that. But I had to take the unilateral decision to step aside in Fermanagh and South Tyrone and in North Down, even though we have the largest track record of votes and support within those constituencies from unionist perspective, because the greater good. So not talk the talk, we were prepared to walk the walk. And so whilst the other parties fail to cooperate, and that's a matter for them, Paul, unionist voters have the opportunity to plump for the party that they know will do best for them and deliver for them and their family and their community throughout Northern Ireland.
I want to ask you this question directly to you as the leader of the Democratic Unionist Party. Has the departure of Sir Geoffrey Donaldson damaged brand DUP?
I think it's very clear across Northern Ireland that people do not see this as a political story. They see it as a tragedy. They see it very much as something for which we need to see the criminal justice process conduct its stages and come to a conclusion. But nobody is saying to us that it's a problem for the Democratic Unionist Party, because it's got nothing to do with us. And when faced with the same shock and disappointment as people right throughout Northern Ireland were faced with, we took our appropriate steps as we could, and we suspended membership at the time. And we go forward confidently as a party. I had to take the last 2 months, stepping in as I have as leader, to bring colleagues together, to get us into a unified and a positive platform so we can campaign collectively together. And that's exactly what we're doing right throughout Northern Ireland, positively bringing our message to the people and getting a positive response in return.
Let me ask you this question. In terms of a nightmare scenario, on the 5th of July, you don't have a seat in East Belfast, and the DUP are no longer the biggest party. What then? Do you resign?
Well, what then for Northern Ireland, I think, would be a great shame if the consequence of your question is that the majority voice for Northern Ireland in our national parliament refuses to attend, silences itself, fails to deliver for the people. And that's a choice that's there for people on the 4th of July. The DUP stand forward confidently and positively to stand up and speak up for the people of Northern Ireland, to make Northern Ireland work. And that's a choice that the electorate will have on the 4th of July. And I'm confident, Paul, that they will take that positive choice.
And if they don't, would you resign?
It's not a question about me resigning. We go forward together, collectively. I have the honour of leading my party with the unanimous support of my colleagues. But for the electorate of Northern Ireland, the choice is very clear, Paul.
But there is no unionist consensus.
Do they want people to speak up for them in our national parliament, or do they want to be silenced by representation through abstentionism that will deliver not one thing for them or their families?
What would success look like for the DUP on the 5th of July?
Well, I think it's the inversion of what I've just told you. We've been able to set forward not only our track record of delivery for the people of Northern Ireland in our national parliament, but the opportunity to do more. We have relationships right throughout the House of Commons. The change or potential change of a government does not trouble us one way or t'other, because we have relationships within the Labour Party. We have banked commitments within the Labour Party to honour the guarantees that we have achieved for the people of Northern Ireland. There's a lot of work to do on ensuring that we have sufficient public finances to deliver positively for people in Northern Ireland. I started that work. It was me who started raising that issue in Westminster many years ago. We've got positive progress, and we need to do more, and that is for everybody in this province.
And if you have a bad election, what is the way back for the DUP?
Well, I don't see why you keep trying to frame the same question in many different ways. We are going forward into this election positively, confidently, with a message which is about promoting Northern Ireland's place within the United Kingdom, a message that is about making Northern Ireland work, ensuring that we have sufficient public finances and we are able to bank our delivery.
Gavin Robinson, thank you very much. Well, listening to that, Ulster University Professor Deirdre Heenan, Belfast Telegraph Political Editor Suzanne Breen, and Dr David McCann, Deputy Editor of Slugger O'Toole. Deirdre Heenan, Gavin Robinson sees this as a battle between the DUP and Sinn Féin.
Well, it seems to be. I was struck by the amount of times he talked about abstentionism, and he really emphasised the fact that they were there, they were in the National Parliament, and they were speaking for Northern Ireland. I think 5 times he talked about working night and day for Northern Ireland, so he really wanted to stress the fact that he was there. This is difficult for Gavin Robinson. The timing couldn't be worse. He's just taken over as the leader of a divided party. This election came too soon for him, and he is fighting for his own seat, fighting to keep the leadership, and he really doesn't want that conversation about the Irish Sea border. He talked about him not saying certain things, but he was very much part of that whole leadership. He doesn't want to talk about that. He's much happier and more confident when he's emphasising the fact that he is there and he is delivering. But he's not really able to say what exactly it is he has delivered for Northern Ireland. And many would say that the DUP's fingerprints are all over the unmitigated mess of Brexit.
David McCann, how is Gavin Robinson doing on the hustings?
Look, as Deirdre's outlined, he had an almost impossible task. I thought it was interesting that he focused so much on abstentionism and Sinn Féin there, because in the DUP's 3 most marginal seats, in 2 of those, they're battles with the Alliance Party. And the problem that Gavin has with that argument is that Alliance MPs and the Ulster Unionists in that other seat will take their seats. It's not a battle over abstentionism. It's a battle over kind of that more progressive wing of unionism or politics versus what the DUP are offering.
And the Irish Sea border, Suzanne Breen, he doesn't really want to talk about it in that sense, does he?
And that's because he's on very weak ground on that issue. We were told in January that the Irish Sea border no longer existed, that there were zero checks, and we were told that by the DUP leadership. Jeffrey Donaldson may have uttered the words, but Gavin Robinson wasn't a backbencher. He was a deputy leader. He didn't put his hand up and say, no, that's not correct. There wasn't no cautious realism from him at that time. We had numerous DUP peers and MPs who voiced their opposition or their concern. He wasn't one of them. And I think it is very easy now to make Jeffrey Donaldson a scapegoat and to go, it was him, when in reality, Gavin was silent until after Jeffrey Donaldson resigned as leader. For 2 whole months, Gavin Robinson said nothing.
He wasn't really pushing back against the TUV whenever I pushed him on that.
Well, I think the DUP is walking a fine line in the sense that it wants to say the TUV shouldn't be standing, but it's also well aware that it has to appeal to those TUV voters, and it's hoping that on July the 4th, even if people are minded to vote for Jim Allister and his candidates, they will think we don't want to lose this seat for unionism, and they will very reluctantly and in some cases hold their nose and vote DUP. So he doesn't want to be completely a tack dog.
And David McCann, just a quick way to wrap this particular part of the discussion. Will people support the DUP in that sense?
Well, I mean,
hold their nose?
Well, the most recent Lucid Top poll does show, and you pointed this out, the DUP are trending down about 10 points from where they were at the last general election. So Gavin Robinson does have some ground to make that back up.
OK, we'll be talking to you again shortly, panel, but we'll be hearing next from the Sinn Féin Vice President, Michelle O'Neill. Do stay with us. Hello once again, you're watching View from Stormont. At the last general election, Sinn Féin won 7 seats. Earlier I spoke to the party's Vice President, Michelle O'Neill. In this Westminster election, why should people vote for Sinn Féin?
Well, this is a real opportunity for people to have their say in terms of the future, about decisions being made here at home. A vote for Sinn Féin in this election is absolutely a vote for strong leadership, for positive change, for that collective commitment to work together, but to work for all. For me, it's about rejecting Tory austerity. It's about a vote for investing in our public services. It's about the opportunity that we have to deliver change for the people here that we represent in our local assembly and executive. So I think that's what the 4th of July is going to be about for many people.
Isn't, in a Westminster election though, isn't a vote for you a vote for silence?
A vote for Sinn Féin in the Westminster election is very much a vote for an MP that will work very hard for their constituency. It's also a vote for an MP that's part of a very strong team across this island that provides representation, and whether that be working with their executive colleagues here in Belfast, whether that be in Dublin, in London, in Europe. We now have 2 MEPs also in Europe, and also in the United States and the international front. So I think that collective team Sinn Féin is what you get whenever you vote for a Sinn Féin MP.
But at no point have you mentioned Westminster. And I'm just wondering, what influence did Sinn Féin bring to bear in the last Parliament?
So I think that Westminster has proven time and time again that it never has and never will act in the best interests of the people here. I think Brexit is a very sure-footed example of that. But what we have delivered and what we can, where we bring our best maximum impact, is with that strong team. Even in the first 4 months of this executive, our Finance Minister, Kiva Archibald, has knocked the door of the Treasury. She has made progress.
But she was there in her capacity as the Finance Minister at Stormont.
But this is where you get work done. It's an executive minister working with the Treasury, in this case in terms of our finances for public services here. Kiva Archibald has already been able to advance progress. That's far, far more effective than speaking into an echo hollow chamber, sitting on the green branches when the Tories clearly weren't listening.
Well, one of your critics has said that you turn up in London and drink tea.
Well, I heard that. Of course, you would expect a political opponent to come out with that type of statement, but the choice is between sitting on the empty benches and talking into an empty echo chamber where no one is listening, or actually doing the business. And Kiva Archibald has proven that she has been able to make positive change for the people here by knocking the door of the Treasury. And equally alongside that, I think the other really good example of the Sinn Féin strength here is in relation to Brexit. We used our international support that we have to influence that we have protected the Good Friday Agreement in terms of the Brexit debate itself. So practical examples actually of how voting for a Sinn Féin MP makes a difference.
Is Westminster a waste of time then? A waste of space?
Well, I believe that they have never acted in our interests. So that's why I'm saying that when I made the pitch for why people should vote for Sinn Féin in this election, it's very much about let's take control of our own future. Let's vote for decisions to be made here. Let's vote for positive politics in our local executive. I think that's the opportunity people will have on the 4th of July.
Well, let me draw you on that. If Sinn Féin should become the largest party at Westminster, even though you won't be taking your seats, what would be your priority? Would it be uniting Northern Ireland or a border pool?
But isn't this the beauty of the Good Friday Agreement? We can do both things. I have obviously got a political outlook for where I want to see constitutional change on this island, but I'm also the First Minister for everybody who lives here, the north of Ireland, Northern Ireland, whatever you're comfortable to call our home. I'm determined to make politics work here on this island. I'm determined to make the executive work, working with all the other executive colleagues. But I believe we can have the comfort and allow ourselves the space to do the day job of delivering good public services, working for the betterment of everybody, whilst also advocating our views about where we think we should be in the future.
So you would be uniting Northern Ireland first before going near a border pool?
I don't think they're a direct contradiction. I actually think we can do both. I mean, I believe in constitutional change. I believe there's something better for every single one of us who share this island. But my firm commitment is to do my job as First Minister for all of the people here, to try to bring all the parties together, to work collectively in that executive and to deliver on the things that matter to people.
So what would Sinn Féin do to persuade unionists to consider a united Ireland?
I believe the executive gives us a great platform on which to demonstrate how I am committed to working for everybody. What I want is the prize for every single citizen who lives here, regardless of their background. Remember also, there are people here who've made this place their home. 10% of our population comes from the black and ethnic minority community. How do we make this the best place? How do we be an exemplar for what constitutional change could look like in that executive? And I will demonstrate that in every day in my work and what I do in the day-to-day things, but also in deeds. I think those things are also important for people here.
But if unionists are in no mood to listen, how do you reach out to them?
I think that's what you just have to keep doing. We need to keep conversing. We need to have the conversations. At the weekend just past, I attended the Ireland's Future event in the Odyssey Arena. A couple of thousand people came together, and crucially, people from all different backgrounds, including those from the PUL community, the Protestant Unionist Loyalist community, they participated in the conversation. They brought their perspective. That's the healthy space we need to create for each other. Let's listen to each other's hopes and aspirations. Let's find our common ground. Let's work towards something better. I think we have the maturity among ourselves to be able to do those things.
Well, let me ask you then, how do you work towards common ground with a unionist?
I think the common ground has to be prosperity. It has to be about a roof over your head. It has to be about how we build a stronger economy. How do we ensure people have more wages in their pocket? How does the education system serve all of our children? How do we look after the most vulnerable in society? Our common ground, and both Emma Little-Pengelly and myself as First and Deputy First Minister has said that the issue of prosperity is the issue that's going to unite us, and I really want to deliver on that for all the people out there.
Well, let's look at the next Parliament then. You will be sitting outside it, OK, but what contribution can you make to, for example, lowering inflation, the cost of living, things like that, health?
Well, I think that, as I said, I don't believe that Westminster ever acts in our best interest.
But all the
here.
money comes from there.
It does indeed, but the money is the crucial issue here, because we are being underfunded in this executive and in our public services here for 13, 14 years. The Tories have decimated our public services. For 13, 14 years, they have played around fast and loose with the Good Friday Agreement when it came to the Brexit debate. And for 13 and 14 years, these people have, with all their Tory infighting, they've tanked our economy, they've drove up mortgage costs, they have raised inflation. And who pays the brunt? Who pays the price for all of that? It's ordinary workers and families in our community here. So this election gives people a chance to reject that and to say no more to that. And now we need to usher in a new era. Perhaps Labour comes out on the other end of the election, and if they do so, my message to Labour will be exactly the same message as I've had for over 13 years of this Tory rule. We need properly funded public services here. We need to be adequately funded to deliver health and education and all those public services in a state that the people here absolutely deserve.
But you won't be in the House, therefore you'll not be able to speak directly to the likes of Keir Starmer.
Oh yes, I will. I will be knocking Keir Starmer's door on day one. I have a good relationship with Keir Starmer, as I have with other members of the Labour Party. We've been building that over some time. We want to work with Labour because particularly when it comes to our political situation here, Labour have skin in the game. They were part of the architecture of the Good Friday Agreement, and perhaps they'll be more respectful of our Good Friday Agreement and our political institutions here than the Tories have been thus far. So I think there's a real opportunity for a reset of British-Irish relations on the other side of this election. And also I want to work constructively with the new government and to continue the work that we have started with this new executive around getting a properly funded public services here.
You would also presume want to lean on the Labour administration to deal with the legacy legislation.
Absolutely. I mean,
Repeal it.
yes, because again, this is another example of how fast and loose the Tories have played with the needs of victims here. So Labour have made a statement that they will repeal that legislation. We will work with them to ensure that that is the case. That's the desire of all political parties here, but more importantly, it's the desire of all the human rights organisations, all the victims' organisations. So there's an opportunity for Labour to to make right what the Tories have done absolutely wrong.
You'll be putting pressure on them from day one then?
Absolutely.
Now, you had two bruising elections in the Republic last week. Did Sinn Féin get it right?
No, I think we didn't realise our full ambition in that election, and we have to work out why that was. I think there's probably a combination of reasons, but we'll work our way through that and get ourselves back out, because I believe there'll be a Dáil election sometime in the coming months. So we'll go back out ever more determined, having listened to the voters. We did make some gains.
Well, you did. You came back with 2 MEPs. You went into the election with
We're
one.
the only party here in the North now that have representation in Europe. So we have 2 MEPs and we have 102 councillors elected. That's an increase in 20.
It was an increase, but it wasn't the increase that you had hoped for.
Absolutely, some success, but didn't meet our, I suppose, the ambition that we had for the party.
And looking at the broader picture, in light of what you've just said there, has the party been distracted by politics south of the border?
Absolutely not. I mean, we're a national organisation. We've always worked on a national basis. We contest elections right across the island. I think that's a strength, actually. It's a strength particularly that we were able to show throughout the Brexit debate. So no, I mean, we fought the election. It's done now. We're moving on to fight the next campaign in the south. But for me, right now, we're focused very much on the 4th of July, what the Westminster election can do here in order to be able to send that message to reject the Tories and to send, I think, a really, really strong message about what people want here. And I think the people here, certainly in the doors that I'm knocking, people want the executive to work, they want the assembly to work, they want local politicians working together. And they want positive politics.
Before we move on from the border, you advocate an open border on the island of Ireland. Are you happy that the Irish government is carrying out searches on people travelling by bus from north to south?
No, I think this is it goes right to the heart of the Good Friday Agreement, that freedom of movement across our island. So we need to ensure that any moves that are made in terms of trying to control migration or illegal migration, that the rules are sensible and practical. But look, when it comes to this issue...
Well, are these practical and sensible rules being used by the Irish government?
This is not anything new. This has actually always been the case. There's always been that type of approach. But I'm absolutely opposed to any sort of hard border. I fought that for the whole of the Brexit debate. I don't believe that's the desire of the Irish government either. I think what we need to see when it comes to immigration are fair, compassionate, human rights compliant policies in place, and I think that we can get to that point. I think that unfortunately this issue of immigration has become sort of a far right agenda that they're trying to promote and divide people, and I think we need to avoid that.
They didn't play it well, did they?
Well, I think that we have to take some criticism in terms of being able to articulate our view, but certainly for me, we need to have migration policies that are fair, that are effective, that are compassionate, because I believe we're a compassionate people who actually want to help people who come from, war-torn regions. We want to be able to be compassionate, but we need to have a system that works and people understand.
What will success look like for Sinn Féin on the 5th of July?
Well, we want to we take nothing for granted. We know we have to work hard to earn people's votes, and we will do so. I want us to retain our 7 seats that we currently have, and obviously I want to increase our vote share across all the other constituencies that we're standing in. I want to maximise progressive MPs returned that can say no collectively to the Tory agenda that we've had for the last 13 years, and people have borne the brunt of all of that. So I think it's about progressive politics coming out the other side. And for me, it's about growing the Sinn Féin vote that we can make a difference.
Well, you have said already you're going into this election with 7 seats. Is it about holding your own, or is it about making a gain anywhere?
Well, I don't think any party goes into an election with anything other than wanting to make a gain. So holding our 7 seats obviously is really, really important, but obviously we want to make gains also.
Michelle O'Neill, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our commentators are still here. David, I'm going to start with you this time. Sinn Féin sees this election as a referendum on the executive.
No, absolutely. And look, Sinn Féin's raison d'etre is about shifting the focus away from Westminster to here, and that was clear all the way throughout Michelle O'Neill's interview. She talked about the role of people like Keith Archibald in actually making the argument to the Treasury about better funding. She actually talked about the empty green benches, those famous pictures that you see whenever Northern Ireland debates are up there. And that's very much Sinn Féin's bread and butter in a Westminster election. Why is that the case? Because one of their main rivals in this contest, the SDLP, of course, do take their seats. And for Sinn Féin, again, for those 7 seats that they have at the minute, they want to really bring home to voters that any decisions about here are mostly made in Stormont, and then Dublin, and then obviously the international arena, and that was very much the pitch.
So in that case, why stand for Westminster?
Well, I think really what we witnessed there is the paradox at the heart of Sinn Féin's manifesto. So on the one hand, they're saying Westminster's irrelevant, it's an echo chamber, it isn't good to us, there's no sense in which they treat us well. And on the other hand, urging people to vote for Sinn Féin MPs. So people struggle to make sense of that. And also the strapline that talks about strong leadership and positive change. How can a party that's been in government for 17 years talk about change? They have been in the executive. They've had the levers of power here. So it's a difficult argument around Westminster. So they deliberately flip it and conflate the issues of Westminster and the executive, talking, for example, about their finance minister. But she's an MLA and she's doing that as an MLA. So the difficulty is, how then can you say you have any influence if you're not in the Parliament? It's a difficult argument for them, and I think that's where the wheels come off. Also, I think, we've been told that Sinn Féin have this very slick machine, that they're a very well-managed party, and yet the wheels came off last week, and we need to understand what happened there.
Well, let's take a look at this election. People know when they vote for Sinn Féin in a Westminster election that the MP they get, if it is a Sinn Féin MP, will not take his or her seat there.
Yes, they do, and I don't think that is a huge issue for nationalist voters, because they do look at those pictures and they see the empty benches. Some people probably would prefer their party to take their seats, but I don't think it's make or break.
What about the immigration issue, which we touched on there in the elections south of the border? What do you make of what Michelle O'Neill had to say about that?
Look, immigration has been an issue that nobody thought would harm Sinn Féin. Its opponents in the south were always looking for things. The legacy of the IRA campaign, or that Sinn Féin was too left-wing, too radical, too revolutionary, and yet it has been this issue on which Sinn Féin has fallen from 35% in the opinion polls till 11 to 12% in the recent elections in the south. That's a big drop, and we never thought we would see the day of people in Dublin with tricolours calling Sinn Féin traitors. And despite what Michelle O'Neill says, the party has changed. It has flip-flopped on this issue, and it is now toughening up its position on immigration. That's because its current position is a vote loser.
That's where we must draw a line for now. Thank you, panel. We'll talk to you again later in the programme. Now, in the coming weeks here on View from Stormont, you'll be hearing from senior members of the other parties ahead of the general election. And let me remind you that there is a list of candidates standing in all 18 constituencies in Northern Ireland on our website. Just search UTV News. Well, still to come, much more from our commentators, plus the view from Westminster with Kevin Maguire and Peter Cardwell. Do stay with us. Hello again, you're with View from Stormont, and with me in the studio, our panel. Suzanne, what was your take away from the weekend Lucid Talk poll?
The poll for the Belfast Telegraph was a very interesting one, and the big winners were clearly Alliance. They were up 2 points to 17%. That's back to their 2019 Westminster performance. And the SDLP, things haven't been going great for the party, but they're up 3 points to 13%, and it puts Claire, Hannah and Colm Eastwood, I think, in very strong positions to hold their seats. Sinn Féin was on 24 and that is a 2-point drop. We have seen a slide in recent polls in the north for Sinn Féin, but it still should hold its 7 Westminster seats comfortably. The DUP was up, but only by 1 point, and it is 10 percentage points below where it was at in 2019, and I think that does put some of its seats at risk. The TUV was down, and the Ulster Unionists, they're also down.
Yeah. And David, that drop of 10% from 2019, from 31% to 21%, the DUP will want to put a positive spin on that, but the reality is they're 10% down.
No, absolutely. And look, I've seen DUPers pointing out, well, we're not standing in places like North Down, and they're arguing that accounts for a bit of it. But look, I don't see how they drop more than 6 or 7 points without some paint being taken off their Westminster team. You know, Gavin Robinson's defending a majority of just 1,800 votes. You got Paul Girvan in South Antrim defending a majority about twice that size. So, you know, in some of these seats, they can't afford big swings. And again, that's where the party leader is fighting in East Belfast, and it will see dents in some other majorities as well. So definitely, it will definitely be something that they'll want to arrest over the next 2.5 weeks.
And do you think that can be done? They can arrest that decline?
Well, I suppose the difficulty is we're talking about very small margins here. A couple of hundred votes can make a difference here in some of the seats we're talking about. So they will be concerned. They might say they're not, but of course they will be concerned. And I think the big issue for them will be galvanising the vote, getting people out and addressing voter apathy. You know, the last election was about Michelle O'Neill becoming First Minister. Prior to that, it was about Brexit. There isn't really an overarching big issue here, and people are saying to themselves, well, what's the point? Why would I go out and vote? And it is actually the marginal seats that they're really desperate to get people out, to galvanise their own electorate and say, how can we get people out? Alliance will be delighted with this poll and really feel that it gives them a fighting opportunity to take those seats in Lagan Valley.
Suzanne, I'm just wondering, will there be comfort for the DUP in the decline in the potential vote for the TUV?
Look, if the TUV is going down, it is good news for the DUP, but they've not gone up by the percentage that the TUV are down. The TUV are down 3 points. The DUP is only up by 1 point, and I think Deirdre is completely right. I mean, I detect a lot of apathy in working class unionist areas towards this election. And
why?
I think it is over the Irish Sea border. I think they're completely disillusioned that the party agreed to a deal and sold it in a certain way and is now backtracking. I don't think that automatically means all those people will go and vote TUV, but I think that they may well sit at home on July the 4th. And what we know about the Alliance vote is that it does come out that there will be a high turnout in those Alliance areas. So that will worry the DUP.
So there's no danger this time, is there, David, then that it'll become quite simply a sectarian headcount?
Well, it could do, and if turnout is low, I mean, that would chime with what we saw at the last local elections, where unionist working class areas just did not turn out. There was almost a 15-point differential between working class nationalist areas and working class unionist areas at the last local government election. If that does happen, then, as Suzanne's pointing out there, Alliance are on for a very good day in a number of constituencies, as well as Sinn Féin.
Deirdre, what will the main issues be for the local parties in this election? Because none of them has published a manifesto yet.
No, and you might say, well, who reads the manifestos anyway? Only people like us, I know. And otherwise, how are they relevant? I think really the parties here will be stressing the issue of finance, because the other issues that we talk about in this programme every week, health, education, infrastructure, are all fully devolved. But really, it's the finance that they need to be pushing this. And you heard Michelle O'Neill talking about how they've been underfunded. So I think every party will talk about getting a good deal for Northern Ireland, addressing the fiscal floor, readdressing the Barnett consequentials and saying if Wales could get a better deal, we need to get a better deal. We need at least 23% more in terms of funding. And that makes sense because in the end, Westminster can control our finances. If they go to the incoming government and say, we have been underfunded, it is simply impossible for us to live within this financial envelope, it makes sense. But I would say this, any incoming government would say, well, show us your plans. What do you intend to do with this money? We're not going to write you a blank cheque and say, here you go and come back again when you want more money. I think it is really important that these parties say, here's our plan for health, here's our plan for education, this is what we intend to do around infrastructure, these are the short-term priorities and here are the long-term priorities. Simply going
Are our
with a wish
politicians
list,
up to that?
I don't think so. I think if we...
Wow.
Well, I don't think so. If we look at the executive, we've had all sorts of promises that the new executive would deliver for us. We haven't had a single piece of legislation. We've had a motion on everything from motherhood and apple pie, childcare, health, education, and delivered absolutely nothing. And I will say this because it is really important.
Please.
No sign of a programme for government. How can we fund what we don't know what we're funding?
I want to ask you, Suzanne, about the event on Saturday in Belfast, Ireland's future. Leo Varadkar said after that, a united Ireland should be a political objective rather than a political aspiration.
Really, really strong words from Leo Varadkar, and I think it's a great irony that it's the party of the blue shirts that has produced the greenest and most pro-Republican Taoiseach that we have ever seen. I think he was constrained when he was in that office, constrained by Fine Gael, constrained by the programme for government that he had agreed, constrained by the civil servants, and I think we will see Leo Varadkar at much more liberty to speak his mind in Irish unity. I could envisage him playing a really, really significant role in a broad-based campaign because he's going to reach places and people that Sinn Féin never will in terms of winning converts on this side of the border for the project.
How quickly will that happen, do you believe? Will it be this side of a general election in the Republic?
No, it definitely
It's longer
won't.
term.
In terms of a border poll, I mean, I couldn't see anything before 2030.
A quick final question around the table for each of you. What will success look like for the parties on the 5th of July? David.
Well,
Briefly.
for the DUP, I think if they can hold their 8 seats, that will be a massive sigh of relief, but in particular, Gavin Robinson being returned.
OK. David Raheenan?
I think for the Alliance, they will want to come back with 3 MPs and they want to prove that the Alliance surge is still alive and kicking, and that's what success
Suzanne
will look
Breen,
like.
in 5 seconds.
The DUP returning Gavin Robinson in East Belfast and Alliance getting one other to
Thank you, panel, very much indeed. Now, nationally, in the polls at least, it looks like one-way traffic for Labour. They could gain a supermajority, and the re-emergence of Nigel Farage as the new leader of Reform UK has done little to embolden Rishi Sunak and the Tories. To discuss that and much more, I was joined earlier from Westminster by the Associate Editor of the Daily Mirror, Kevin Maguire, and Talk TV's Peter Cardwell. Peter, what do you make of the weekend poll which warns that the Tories face electoral extinction after the 4th of July?
Yes, well, this put them down to 72 seats, and that would be very, very low indeed. In fact, you'd have trouble having a front bench, all the shadow ministerial roles that would need to be filled, as well as committee chairman for the Select Committee, chairman and women. So certainly that would make the opposition of the United Kingdom a very, very different thing to what it has been in my lifetime anyway. And certainly that's the Armageddon, Starmageddon, if you will, scenario, certainly for what might happen. That presupposes a lot of things, and there are problems with all polling models. No polls are entirely accurate, and of course they're just a snapshot of how people feel on a particular day. But there's absolutely no doubt that the Conservatives will do very badly in this election, and that the Labour Party will do very, very well, and that Keir Starmer will have a very strong majority, unless something absolutely catastrophically dramatic happens in the next 2 weeks. But that would have to mean that all the information we have, all the polling, even the information we have from the local election results a few weeks ago, all of that would have to be wrong in regard to any signifier of what happens in the general election.
Kevin, on these figures, Labour would be on track to gain seats previously thought to be unwinnable.
No, absolutely. They've been very careful on their selection of candidates from the centre, so they won't get a lot of unknown quantities. But they couldn't fit all their MPs on the green benches on the government side. Even if they sat on each other's laps, you wouldn't be able to get them all in there. And it is a result of what appears to be a seismic split on the right of British politics, with the Conservative Party and Reform UK essentially both on the right going after the same voters. And that is a gift for Keir Starmer and Labour. Now, Nigel Farage, Reform UK, when the Brexit Party in 2019 didn't stand candidates against Tory MPs, and that helped give Boris Johnson that big 80-seat majority. Now standing candidates against Conservatives and Labour, when they get most of their votes from the Conservatives, is causing absolute chaos for Rishi Sunak, and is why it looks, as you say, that Labour could win seats they never thought possible in parts of Sussex and Surrey in the south of England, up in Nottinghamshire, where areas that were traditionally true blue Tory. It's changing the political landscape at the moment. These, of course, are all forecasts, and there's a while to go yet, but Keir Starmer, it looks like he's going to be carried on a wave of Labour MPs into Downing Street.
Peter, is it too simplistic to suggest that the Tories are in the midst of a death spiral here?
I think they are in a death spiral. I think there is a real difference between what is happening at the centre of the Conservative Party, the top of the centre of the Conservative Party in their campaign, and what many people feel on the ground. I speak to a lot of people who are, the people who are pushing the leaflets through the letterboxes, knocking the doors in all parties, but particularly in the Conservative Party, and they are very frustrated at how this election is being run. Even just things like sign off for leaflets and things like that is taking a lot longer than people want. Rishi Sunak has had so many gaffes, so many problems, and in fact thought himself of taking a bit of a step back in this election, which is absurd when he is still, at least for the next 2.5 weeks, the Prime Minister of this country. It's interesting that there are some senior people within the Conservative Party, even Grant Shapps, for example, key lieutenant of Rishi Sunak, although a possible contender for the leadership of the Conservatives should he retain his seat, that he is saying that actually the likelihood is that Labour will win. He's conceded that, essentially. So when you're in this position where basically everybody knows what's going to happen, well, the country and certainly Westminster will move on to the next thing, which is what does the Conservative Party actually look like after this election? And if it's small, if it's fewer than 100 MPs, well, that could mean a lot of things. It could mean that there is a hard right. It could mean that there is actually more of a left-wing consensus in terms of the One Nation Conservatives who may have survived because their seats are perhaps stronger and with larger majorities. So it's really interesting to see what will happen there. There's also the big question of what Nigel Farage does next and whether he has the letters MP after his name.
Well, indeed, because today, Kevin, at the launch of the Reform Manifesto, or contract, as Nigel Farage referred to it, he predicted 6 million votes, but only a handful of MPs. But at what cost will that be to the Tories?
Oh, huge cost. It's a first past the post electoral system. Winner takes all. You win a majority on a minority of the votes. There's never been, this side of the Second World War, a government that has got 50% of the vote. So we're quite used to it. Tony Blair, back in 2005, got a healthy 66 seat majority on 36% of the vote. But most of the votes he gets, Nigel Farage, come from the Tories. And he knows that. And for his project to work, and his project is to reshape the right of British politics, in which he comes out on top, saying, look, I could be challenging to be Prime Minister in 5 years. He needs to smash the Tory party, either to take it over or to replace it. So he's going after Tory votes. That's what it's all about. He knows what he's doing.
And an interesting little shift, actually, from Richard Tice, who was the leader of Reform UK, who said he wanted to smash the Tories, and Nigel Farage, who said that his belief was that the Conservatives had already smashed themselves, that they had disintegrated themselves.
Peter, if the poll were replicated, the poll we were talking about at the weekend, if it were replicated after the election, wouldn't it give a blank cheque to Keir Starmer?
Yes, it would. And the question is, what does opposition look like? Does some of that opposition perhaps come from within his own party if he has a majority of more than 100, or maybe even more than 200 if that poll is to be believed? Well, then we're in a situation where there may well be a lot of MPs who aren't controllable. Will they do exactly what they say? What about people like Diane Abbott and John McDonnell? How much of not really a threat, but how much trouble could they cause? And actually, a lot of the opposition to what Keir Starmer might want to do, maybe not immediately, but certainly as time went on, may actually come from within his own party. But there will be big changes within Westminster, not just lots of new Labour faces, but lots of people retiring, changing, standing down. And Westminster will be a very, very different place, and there'll be a lot of younger MPs as well, a lot of people as well who have been sitting on these opposition benches for 14 years, who now finally have a chance at ministerial office within Labour. And some people might come back as well. Douglas Alexander, the former Shadow Foreign Secretary, for example. There's a woman called Mary Cray, who was a very able Shadow Minister, who might come back. And there will be pressure on Keir Starmer to not just have exactly the same shadow ministerial team he has now, although I don't think there'll be too many changes at the very top, but where does he put some of those extra people? So it's a sort of embarrassment of riches, really, for Keir Starmer.
And Kevin, what would be Labour's priority, do you believe, here in Northern Ireland?
Yeah, that's a big question. Like Hilary Benn will be almost certainly the Northern Ireland secretary. You've got a huge majority in Britain. You think less about Northern Ireland. I think that's just that's a factor of British UK politics. And I think the sweet spot, I was told by a strategist in Labour some time ago, was Starmer has a majority of 60 to 100. He didn't want it to be too small, then he would have been beholden to his left. He doesn't want it to be too big, although it's quite a nice problem to have, because how do you control so many people? As Peter said, you can't give them jobs, there's no prospect for them. They're just going to be, on the terrace carousing all the time, and that creates its own problems.
Well, Keir Starmer has said that he would repeal the legislation on legacy if the government, if Labour become government, and he would be under pressure surely to do that pretty quickly.
Yes, that's in the manifesto, Paul. Certainly I was reading that the other day, and certainly what they're keen to do as well. Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, has said today that she wants a better economic relationship with the European Union, and that set a few hairs running as well. Certainly there will be real support for devolution. Hilary Benn is someone who knows Northern Ireland. He knows Brexit as well. He was a very anti-Brexit person, certainly when a lot of that legislation was going through. So they're committed to the Windsor Framework in a way that, for example, Reform UK isn't. They want to end it. So I think there will be a continuity there, but there are also a lot of people at the very top of Labour. Keir Starmer is one of them. Sue Gray is Chief of Staff. Morgan McSweeney, who's from Cork, in fact joined the Labour Party the day after the Belfast Agreement was signed, who understand Northern Ireland in a way that just hasn't been the case at the top of the Conservative Party for a number of years.
Kevin, just for a final question really on this one. What are the former MPs saying to you off the record? Former Tory MPs?
Oh, they're utterly terrified. Absolutely terrified. Those with majorities of 15, 20,000 are working hard in their seats now, and they go on the electoral calculus website to look at what the prospects are of them holding their seats. Some of them, of course, were Brexiteers, and they thought that Farage was an ally, and they're absolutely furious with him, but powerless because he could cost them their seat. Now, he doesn't care because he's got his project, but no, there is real fear. We've hardly seen in this campaign the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, because he's battling to keep his own seat in Surrey, which at the moment it looks like he'll lose. It's an extraordinary election.
There we must draw a line tonight, gentlemen. Kevin Maguire, Peter Cardwell, thank you both very much. And just before we go, I'd like to remind you that this coming Sunday, we have the UTV election debate. Vicky Hawthorne is here with the details.
Yes, Paul, on July 4th, people across Northern Ireland, just like the rest of the UK, will go to the polls in the next general election. I'll be joined by senior representatives of the larger parties who are all vying for your vote. But just what are the issues that will decide who will represent us at Westminster? Join me for the UTV election debate Sunday at 8 here on UTV.
And that's View from Stormont this Monday night. Now you can keep up to date with the programme in audio form. Just go to our website or search UTV podcast. View from Stormont will return on Thursday of next week. Until then, from all of us on the programme, thank you for watching. Good night and sleep well.